Paul, pleasure to be sat in front of the microphone talking to you again.
Thanks, Andrew.
Always a difficult situation when you sit down and talk about a new album, because, of course, to us it's very new and we're just hearing it. To you it is history passé, I suppose.
Yeah.
How long ago do we start? I think it was, February 1981 when this project started?
Something like that. When we were doing it, I thought, well, seeing as we're going to take a long time on this, George and I said we'll take as long as we need. Since it's going to take a long time, I thought, well, I'm not going to count, really, I won't bother. I know we're going to take as long as it needs. There's roughly a year or something, it's probably a little bit over that since when I started talking to George. We haven't recorded all the time. You hear me guiltily already trying to sort of answer the people who say, oh, you record forever and ever.
That was a deliberate decision this time. Sit back, relax.
Yeah, really, yeah. Just decided that, that what's happened to the record business a lot more than when I started in it is that now you have your deadlines, you have your budgets, you have this and that, you've got to go into the studio just for so long and stuff. Of course, it makes it a lot more difficult, really. You've got to have your act together. And if you're doing what George and I were attempting to do, which was to make an album that we just enjoyed making and that would please us, really, you start sort of saying, well, we haven't got it right today, or this huge orchestra that everyone else would have accepted as the correct take. We start saying, look, there's mistakes in it. Are we going to own up, or are we going to just pretend like everyone else that it's the correct take? So with George and I, we just said, well, let's do it the right way. Let's just actually own up if something's like that. So that's how we did it. And we found ourselves like redoing the orchestra on Tug of War, for instance, just because we knew we could get it better. So we put aside a lot of those considerations as to how long was it going to take, how much was it going to cost and stuff, and thought, well, the idea always, really, when we started off in the very beginning of our association with Love Me Do, was to actually just make stuff we liked, just have a ball. I got into a group to avoid having a terrible 9-to-5 job and hating it. It's a bit funny to find yourself in a situation where you've sort of come back to that. The record companies are sort of saying 9-to-5, lads, so we'll give you. So we just decided to go this other way and enjoy ourselves.
Now, why George Martin working back with you again? Because you've been doing your own production for a fair while. Did you feel it would be a good idea to get back and see what the two of you could come up with?
Yeah, really. I like George a lot, and I'd always enjoyed working with him in the Beatles. And I thought that he had been a big help. I'd worked with him on Live and Let Die, so I just wanted to ring him up and see how he felt. See, if he was a bit nervous to do it or whatever, maybe we wouldn't have done it. But he said, oh, great, yeah, I'd love to do it. And we immediately started chatting on the phone. The other reasons, really, are that I think he's a very good producer. I think he's very big help to me on things like arrangements. Because he can write music, I can't. I would give him sort of virtually the whole idea for the whole arrangement, but then George is good at voicings and more technical aspects of it. And also on recording, he works mainly with Jeff, because that's another bonus, Jeff Emmerich. So there are a lot of bonuses, or boni, as we call them in the business.
Haven't heard that word used for a fair while. So the chemistry was immediate between the two of you. It wasn't a question of sitting there reminiscing endlessly and thinking about the old days. It just snapped into place and worked.
I think we both fancied working together again. I certainly did, and George told me he did.
Right, let's go through the songs and start at the beginning with Tug of War, which opens with a sequence of sound effects, which sounds like the McCartney family are having their own private tug of war. Is that how you did that little sequence at the beginning?
Thank you very much. No, that is actually the indoor Tug of War championships at Huddersfield.
And I knew there was going to be a funny story connected
It's not
with
a funny story,
Really?
it's perfectly
Absolutely
straightforward.
true.
What do you mean?
Is this a national competition?
Yeah, the indoor Tug of War championships were held about a year ago in Huddersfield. And these are two of the teams. One of the engineers on the album, Eddie Klein. I got him to go up, take a portable up to Huddersfield, and he recorded the whole thing. And it was really with a view to the fact that we might need this kind of stuff. So that's what it is. It's two teams actually doing a Tug of War.
Would you call Tug of War a love song? Even with a title like that? Because it's clever.
I don't know really if it's a love song. I mean, to me, it's just a song about life, really, being a tug of war. I think when I was younger, I had always thought that, life was pretty groovy affair and that tragedies and stuff happened to other people, not really to me. I think which is one of the things of youth. I wouldn't say like, in my personal relationships, but just generally, you have to admit, that it is a bit up and down kind of thing at some point. And this is really my song admitting that there's a lot of up and down. We expected a little bit more. We could have done with a little bit more, please. But seeing as we're not going to get it, it's a tug of war.
Tug of War from Paul's brand new album. I'm interested in the personnel you've used, Paul, particularly Eric Stewart, who's a long-time friend of mine, somebody I've known for a few years through my years in Manchester and 10cc. A great singer on his day, and I think you've used him very well. Some super harmonies on this album.
Yeah, well, I know Eric personally, like you do, and when we were making the album, we didn't really think of hooking up with him or anything. I think he was doing something with 10cc. He happened to come down to visit our family and stuff with his family, and I just thought, well, it'd be a good idea to try and grab him, see if he, Linda and I worked. It was just a hunch that our voices would work well together.
Good hunch.
And yeah, it was really easy to work with. You know, that was one of the nice things about this album, in the way that we did it, by getting some special people in for special jobs. Nearly always it was kind of very easy to do. I mean, there weren't the normal nerves that you would have kind of associated with doing backing vocals and a lot of stuff. It seemed to come very easily, so I suppose the chemistry must have been right, like.
Track number 2 is Take It Away, and I need an explanation from you, because I've listened to this song about 3 or 4 times, and I'm still not quite sure what the message, what the story is.
I haven't got a clue.
I won't accept that as an answer.
Oh, all right. Take It Away. It's just, the chorus just says, why don't you play? It's talking to some musician saying, take it away.
There's a lovely line about the impresario sitting in the hall with his newspaper.
All of those verses and stuff, all those little individual kind of spots, are all to do with reasons for why someone might ask a band to take it away. The first one is a fellow in his car turns on the radio, so then that switching of the radio says to the band, take it away. The next one's an impresario sitting in the audience with a contract for them all. So the thing there is, come on lads, play, because there's this fella in the audience.
This is the big
watching
break.
us, yeah. Mm-hmm. About to screw us silly. what the hell? And then the last one is just a bar, and there's no one actually in that one. But the flowers that are on the table sort of are asking the band to play it, take it away. I think it's mad, if you ask me. I think you're all crazy.
George Martin plays electric piano. You do allow him to have a tinkle with the keyboards?
Well, normally George will kind of have a play, but he won't really want to stay there on the track. You know, he normally says, now let's get a real pianist in. I thought he did some really good stuff, you know. We were just working. I said, oh, come on, George, you know, get in there. He doesn't normally play the part of a musician. He's normally the producer or the arranger. Mind you, we had to keep him off the vocals.
Oh, he wanted to contribute, did he?
Definitely, yeah. We had to fight him off the vocals.
A lot of people would say that you're a very lucky man to have 2 drummers on the track, Take It Away, like Steve Gadd and Ringo Starr. How did he come to join the party?
Well, I say, you know, the idea with the album was to work with whoever we thought we needed. George and I had said we wouldn't work just with a group, Wings or any group. We would just cast each thing as if it was a film or something, and we'd just decide who we needed. One of the drummers, the name kept coming up with anyone I worked with, the fellas in Wings and stuff. Steve Holly, his big idol is Steve Gadd, you know, and he kept saying, wow, you know, Steve Gadd's a really great drummer. So George and I thought, well, ring him up, see if he'll come. So he came. Then Ringo was coming to work on another track, so managed to persuade them to both be there at the same time, kind of thing. And Ringo said, well, the one drummer I wouldn't mind drumming with would be Steve Gadd. They'd worked together before. And Steve didn't mind at all. The thing about someone like Steve Gadd, for me, apart from the fact that he's a good musician, but most of the fellas I'd worked with would be good musicians, is that he's already tuned up. He's sort of ready to go with kit. Sometimes you can spend like 4 hours at a recording studio working out the drum sound.
Yeah.
And if you're the singer or the bass player, obviously you get a bit cheesed off, you know, you're waiting for someone to sort of get it. Maybe you occasionally think he should have got it before he came, should have had an idea of what he wanted. Well, someone like Steve Gadd had that idea, just kind of sat down, you 2, 3, 4, ba-dum.
Towards the end of the song, once again really excellent. Who scored those, you or George?
What we've put on the album, we say arrangements by McCartney and Martin. You could call it 50-50. It's a bit like the relationship with John and I, songwriting. It was sort of 50-50, although certain bits were just completely by me or certain bits were just completely by him. I think on Take It Away, I think it was a joint effort.
Mm-hmm. The people will probably expect me to ask you why Wings haven't worked with you on this album and why you've got together a collection of very eminent popular musicians to make the LP with you.
Yeah, well, we talked about it early on, Denny and I and the fellas in Wings and Lady in Wings. I just said that I talked to George Martin and that we decided that it was time for some kind of change to try and do something different instead of just making another Wings album. nothing against the group, but mainly due to the fact that working with a group is limiting. There's no doubt about that. Even working with a group as good as the Beatles, you often wanted to pull in French horn players, orchestras for Day in the Life. You often were wanting to use other people just to freshen that up even. And I would say the Beatles obviously is like the best group by far that I've ever played with. So the idea of working with Wings again was, in truth, it would have just been limiting, I thought, and George agreed. So I said to everyone, look, you know, here's the George, and slightly blamed it on him a bit. Only a bit, though. And said, look, George and I have talked it over, and he thinks we should just cast each thing, and I do too. And I mean, it wasn't just George as the villain coming in and saying you can't use Pete Best and stuff, but there is obviously an element of that, where you've got to consider a thing, you've got to think how you're going to do it best.
Let's move to somebody who cares, and yet another huge name from the world of music, Stanley Clarke, one of the great bass players of our lifetime. Is he an old friend of yours? Or
no, I'd never met him before, actually, but in line with what we've been talking about, George and I agreed that there wasn't much point in ringing up someone we thought was kind of average to ask him to play. We thought, well, we'll start at the top, and if the top 5 people refuse us, then we'll have to take number 6 or whatever. Really, it came about because I wanted to play some guitar on certain tracks. Because I started off as a guitar player way back when in the Quarrymen.
Right, then they converted you. Or you converted
Well, really,
yourself.
it was. I got lumbered, actually. As often happens with bass players. If there's too many guitarists in a group, the more dominant guitarists will kind of naturally demand to stay as guitarists, which was John and George. And somebody like myself my guitar had broken anyway. I got put onto piano when we were out in Hamburg. And then after a while, Stu Sutcliffe left. He was going to stay there in Hamburg. And I just borrowed his bass and kind of played it upside down. And in that way,
revolutionised bass playing, in fact.
Upside down,
yeah.
The only way. I got to enjoy it a lot. But originally, it was just because I was the only one who'd do it, actually. The others refused. It's funny, I was talking to George Harrison. He remembered it that way, although it's been written up in a couple of books very differently, as if I was the big pushy freak who always wanted to get rid of Stu Sutcliffe and wanted to dominate everyone and become the great bass player. It's actually the other way around, really. Sort of got lumbered. So anyway, I wanted to play guitar. So I then didn't want to overdub the bass. I wanted to play live there and have a bass player there. And I thought, oh, somebody's going to say, why didn't you play bass? You know, and all the obvious things. Oh, flipping heck, going off bass, are we? And all that. And I thought, oh, it's only music. It's only a bit of fun. So I'll just ask Stanley if he'll do it. And I'll own up to him, as I did when he came over. I said, I've only got you so as I can nick your licks. Which he was quite happy. He showed me all his licks and that, and I nicked him.
We moved to the first track on the album, which involves Stevie Wonder. I was doing a bit of research. His first hit was in August 1963. Yours, I think I'm right in saying, is October 1962. Did you actually know of him very early in the 60s?
Yeah, we heard, like most people, there's this 12-year-old blind kid who's signed by Motown, and he's incredible. Listen to this. And we all listened to Fingertips Part 1 and Part 2. And that was him playing the harmonica, and that was him singing, and it was pretty amazing.
Let's talk about 1982 and What's That You're Doing, which is very Paul McCartney and very Stevie Wonder. And I think probably that took some doing, didn't it, to gel the two together?
Well, funnily enough, it didn't, really. Originally, I got with Stevie to record a song called Ebony and Ivory, where I had written the song, and it's about black and white people, things, piano, keyboards, whatever. I like the idea of him singing part of it and me singing part of it. So he came down to do that, and we did that. And then he started jamming, as is his wont. And he got on the synthesizer and started plonking away. And it was a great riff he came up with, which was the What's That You're Doing riff. So I just got on drums, actually, and just started to try and keep up with him and just banging away on drums. And he gradually sort of cut my part back and kind of said, well, couldn't you just kind of go boom, chick, boom, chick? So I said, fine, terrific.
Oh.
I'd love to do that. Gulp. So anyway, we put it down very, very simply like that. And then he wasn't too sort of wild on the drumming still. So I kind of redid the whole thing. I'm glad he suggested I redid it, actually, because the finished drum is much better.
He's a fair drummer himself.
Well, that's what I mean. This is the problem, of course. You know, he's so good that it's not easy working with him. But by the same argument, it's not hard. There's no difficulties. But he's good. And so you've got to try and be good, too, so he keeps you on your toes.
On the album as well, I presume I'm right in saying that you've used Linn drums, the electronic drums?
Yeah. Stevie came out to Montserrat, where we were recording, at George Martin's studio out there, and he brought with him this rhythm machine. He told me about it on the phone. He said, there's this new box they're making, so I think you might really like it. And he gave me it.
As a present?
As a prezi.
When you sing with Stevie Wonder, do you feel it's a slightly different, more bluesy, more rhythm and blues type Paul McCartney voice that's coming through to parallel what Stevie Wonder's doing?
Yeah, I think you have to, yeah. I would have had to even if Stevie's voice hadn't been on the track, because the track itself is such a funky track. So you would have to do that to make it blend. But it is true that when you're singing right next to Stevie, it does things to your vocal. Actually, I loved it, actually, because I started to find myself without even meaning to. Little things were coming in my voice that I'd never kind of discovered before. Little intonations that I'd call black things, little sort of wobbles in the voices that you normally only hear from black guys.
As you listen to the track, What's That You're Doing, very carefully, you will hear towards the end, I think I'm right in saying, a snatch of a former Beatles hit.
Yeah,
whose idea was that? Yours or his?
That was Mr. Stephen Morris, who threw it in. Stevie just actually threw it in. He was doing his rough vocal track. And at the end he threw in She Loves You, She Loves You, yeah, yeah. So then when we did the backing vocals, we kind of answered him back. And he's a brilliant musician.
Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney and What's That You're Doing. And the next track, Here Today, which I think, I have to say, sir, is absolutely beautiful. And it goes back to using strings like what you used them in the days of Eleanor Rigby and Yesterday, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Was that deliberate, or did it just come about that the song would be best suited to a string arrangement?
It started off like that when I was talking to George Martin. I was saying to him, well, it would be really nice to have a string quartet on this, but we can't, can we? Because we did it on Yesterday. And we sort of said, yeah, I suppose so. And so we were trying to think of some alternative on a string quartet. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, this is stupid. It's like saying because you've used a guitar once in 1980, you should never use a guitar again. It's silly kind of condemning this format of a string quartet just because we'd used it once on a famous record, Yesterday. So I then said to George, look, let's just try it with a string quartet. Let's get it all worked up. Let's do it. But there's no reason why we shouldn't keep using string quartets till we drop, kind of thing. So he said, yeah, well, go on, let's try it. So we did the arrangement together. George wrote it all out, got him in, and we said, oh, come on, it's great. We really like it, and didn't really have to bother changing a thing, really. It just seemed to fit with the song, and with the sort of nostalgia thing of the song, too. It also makes it seem a little bit more 60s with this Yesterday kind of quartet on it. I was just sitting down trying to write a song, I felt like writing something, and I got the opening chords. I was just thinking about them and stuff. And I'd had these thoughts in my mind. I was around about the time, just after John's thing, and I'd sort of wanted to do something, but the worst thing would have been to do something a bit corny, because I know he would have kind of just parted the clouds and blown a raspberry at me, There was that feeling, you just thought, oh dear, So I tried to put into words what my sort of thoughts were, which was, if you were here today, what would you say when someone kind of says, and what was John like then? And I start saying, oh, he was like this and he was like that. And, I can imagine him blowing the raspberry, so this is what the song is. I'm sort of saying, even though you blow that raspberry, I really did actually know you, and you were a great guy. Although the whole album that has been, some people were saying it was supposed to be a tribute thing, that got into the newspapers. Some guy just wrote, this is going to be a tribute album to John. So it wasn't actually at all, and I was just going to not put anything on to do with John. But this ended up to be like one track, which was sort of a tribute.
Have you spent a lot of time, Paul, thinking about those days since John's death?
Yeah, I think just as much as I had before it, maybe a bit more, of course, because it crystallizes stuff. I'm always thinking about stuff like that, if anything suggested, somebody kind of says, oh, and there's that song, Strawberry Fields. Of course, I couldn't get through that without thinking about Strawberry Fields and how we recorded it and the days. And when I go to, like, Abbey Road Studio 2, which is the main studio we always used to work in, I can't resist taking people around and doing sort of the guided tour. It's great, I just love it. I still have a kind of great feeling about all that stuff, really, because no matter all the rubbish that went down, the great stuff that went down was really nice, and we did manage to get it on.
Let me talk to you just a moment about the classical musicians involved on that track. What sort of empathy do you have with people like that?
I think at first it's embarrassing, because you feel like you're in a different world, you come from a different world than what they do. You're in pop, they're in classical, and there's a barrier, which it's like the Iron Curtain, it doesn't actually exist, it's just a mental barrier. So, in fact, the funny thing is that in EMI in the old days, they used to have a switch that was for the equalisation on the board, and you'd actually used to be able to switch between pop and classical. And we used to get very annoyed. We used to say, what have they got that we haven't? You know, why do they have a special position on the thing? I'm sure they got annoyed with why does it go to pop sometimes. We started off with the normal kind of class barrier that you have, you know, but the more you get to know people and stuff, the more you realise we're all the same, really. And no matter whether they're classical or schmashical, it doesn't matter really, you know. They're still musicians, they still got to play notes, and they still got to get them right. So the pressure's on them just like it is on you. I get on quite easily with them now, you know. No problem.
Right. Side 2 of the album starts with Ballroom Dancing. I've written down here, was that a social attribute in Liverpool in your early days? Can you waltz when you do the foxtrot?
Well, you know, I was just from the generation where your mum always used to teach you the waltz. I never got to the foxtrot. I was working on the quick step, but waltz was as far as I got, actually, because you had to have one dance, you know. And George Harrison and I used to live near each other in Liverpool, and we used to live in a place called Speak.
Where the airport is.
Yeah, we used to live there. And he and I used to go to a dance up the road, just at a school after hours. The one dance I remember, and it wasn't a ballroom or anything, but it was home to us. School, you were lucky. We used to have a dance in a shoebox. But you know, so George and I always used to go and pay our money to go in and look at, search the whole place for girls all evening, any likely-looking girls.
Oh, there's honesty for you.
Well, this is what people go.
That's right.
My kind of people go to ballrooms for, but. We'd always have our eye on one each kind of thing, but we'd never have the nerve. So the only dance we ever used to do was the last waltz, because we thought, well, if we come and don't do any dances, that's really pathetic. We've got to do it now. So we used to kind of nudge each other. Okay, last waltz, you grab her, I'll grab her. And with, you know, red faces, it was extremely embarrassed. We used to do it, the last waltz, and then go home. And we never had time to talk to the girls, of course. There's only one waltz. We never had an awful lot of success, actually. But those kind of memories of ballroom dancing, it's a nice kind of warm thing for me. I mean, I like come dancing. But I love all that stuff. I love that people, you know, you see the young 16-year-old ballroom dancers, every bit as serious as the kind of mums and dads. I think it's a great escape. I think it's a great escape, actually, for kind of ordinary people. That kind of stuff, because they can dress up and all look gorgeous and learn stuff, keeps everybody... I think it's a nice thing. The song itself actually is sort of, it's just me looking back at my youth, taking a couple of little sort of phrases and a couple of little dreams from then, and then tying it all up in the ballroom idea, you know, of ballroom dancing.
Well, diversification, I think that's the name of the album. It really is. We now find Paul McCartney meeting Carl Perkins, obviously somebody who you've liked for quite a number of years. 56, Blue Suede Shoes, goes back, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Well, he was one of our idols, Carl. He was... At that time, there were a few people who were quite well known, and there were a couple who were a little bit more underground, and the sort of more underground people would have been like Carl Perkins, James Ray, Richie Barrett. Of course, Carl had the original version and wrote Blue Suede Shoes, but unluckily for him, Elvis recorded about a couple of months after him. Well, luckily for him in one way, but it spoiled Carl's version being the kind of definitive one. We used to love like Honey Don't and True Love and Movie Mag, some great songs of his. But he was one of our big favourites, and Johnny Burnett was another. A couple of people then, we used to have LPs and just to sit around all the time just listening to these LPs. So Carl was always a big favourite, and he turned up in London when we were recording in Abbey Road once with the Beatles, and he just had a little play with us and it was all there. But I suddenly thought, well, we never recorded with him. We didn't really take any advantage of that meeting. And his manager had happened to get in touch with me about something else. He wanted me to do something. And I said, oh, why don't you ask Carl if he'd like to work with me and see if we can do something. Again, on the off chance that the feeling that, well, I'm going to enjoy it. And really, if the whole thing falls through, the worst that will happen, I've had a good time, and then we'd have to rubbish the tapes or something. So Carl was coming out, and so I wrote a song like the day before, which was this one called Get It. He came out, and I said, how do you fancy this song? Do you fancy doing it? And we worked it up together, and we did it. And he's a great guy.
At the end of it, he dissolves into unbelievable laughter. Was that actually live when you did it?
It was just a little joke we'd had going in the sessions. I just said it over the mic, and it got him howling, you know. So we took out my bit, because it wasn't for public consumption, and left his bit in, left the laughing.
through your album, we now come to the shortest track, which features you on guitar and vocoder. I think we need an explanation for the uninitiated at home.
As to what a vocoder is. Most people have heard Herbie Hancock, where he plays a synthesizer, a keyboard, and he has a little mic on headphones, and he talks into that, and it gives the kind of wah, 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 wah sound, and you can actually play the notes. I remember somebody was saying it's for people who can't sing, but obviously that's not strictly true. I mean, you can do it whether you can sing or not. It actually takes the vowels and the lip sounds, like wah, 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 yeah, and all that stuff, and you put the actual note in from the keyboard, so you can get the and then you can go, well, and make it say that.
Sparky's Magic Piano.
So it is Sparky's Magic Piano, exactly, my dear Holmes. We needed a link at that particular point, just the flow of the album. So I got me vocoder out and my guitar and made it up.
Since you and I sat and talked to each other, since when electronic music has got very big in this country, if I can mention the Human League as one band, does that appeal to you, that form of music? Have you enjoyed listening to any of that?
Oh yeah, I love it. It's good. I like Human League, actually. That was our Christmas song, I think, as it was at a lot of people's houses. That was the biggie over Chrissy. But no, I like it. I think it's, I've said it somewhere else, which I think is a very clever trick in that song, the way he says it from his point of view. Then the girl says, I was working as a waitress, that much is true. And then she tells it from her point of view. I think it's good stuff. I always liked all that stuff anyway. When we're talking about early rock and roll, I was quite into stuff like Stockhausen, which is electronic stuff and all that kind of stuff. I've always had a feeling for that. I always used to be down the Radiophonic Workshop. Used to go down and see those people there. You know, I've always liked that kind of stuff. It'll have, like anything, it'll have its limitations. I find we're working with synths. For me, a couple of years ago, I used to think they were like the be-all and end-all, and you'd never ever use a violin again, or a drummer ever again. You used to think they were going to put real musicians out of work, kind of thing, but there's a big art to playing a synthesizer. You can't, just because it can do everything, you can't automatically just sit down and do everything on it. So, you know, it's like anything else. It's just another instrument, really. All this electronic stuff, it's great. I'm sure it'll get to the point where computers are doing the music. That's definitely on the cards. But I think alongside of it, and from my experience anyway, after having worked like 2 weeks with synthesizers, like we might have done on some music we've been doing, we've done a bit of that recently with a drum box and some synthesizers. After having worked for a long time on it all, you hear a record with a real drummer on it and you think, oh, it's great. There's something like human about that. So, you know, I don't agree with people who say guitars are passé and all that rubbish. You know, I think it's all fashions. It'll all come and go.
And that leads us into Dress Me Up as a Robber, which is one of my favourites, I must say. It's been driving me start raving bonkers since I started listening to the album. Because I found when you sang the opening verse, it's very jazzy. If you listen closely to records and you try and learn them and put them in your mind, sometimes it's easy. The way you've done the notation on that, it isn't. And I still can't do it properly because it seems to go all over the place. It's got a sort of jazz feel to it.
It was supposed to be a sort of tropical Latin kind of number. Caribbean tropical nights kind of number. I had it written a couple of years ago, but it didn't have any good words. I only just had I had 2 verses actually, and it was unfinished. So when I played it originally to George and said, do you think this would be a good one for the album, he wasn't too keen on it at first because there wasn't enough of it really to give him a good idea. So I finished it up and said, okay, now how do you like this? You know, is that sounding better? And he got much more enthusiastic about it. So we recorded it, and it has got slightly kind of jazzy chords, really. But it's one I always had a nice little feeling for. You can dress me up as a robber.
What about gigs? This album is complex and interesting in the way you put it together musically. I was immediately thinking, listening through to it, one or two of these would be fun to do on stage. With
we've got Streatham Ice Rink and Runcorn Casino.
Oh, you're going back to Runcorn,
Runcorn Casino.
Be pleased.
It's all lined up, lads. As much coke as you can drink. So we're all right for that. No, I haven't got any plans for playing live just at the moment, because actually we're working on a second LP at the moment.
Yes, I gather. And this involves Michael Jackson, I think I might say.
That involves Michael, yes. So we've got a lot of work at the moment, you know, just buzzing away, enjoying it. After that, there's some talk about doing a TV thing or something. Obviously, it'd be really great to get some of these people and play the music, some of this music with some of these people. So that's looking like a bit of fun, but that's only in the early stages. And then I think after that, maybe towards the end of the year, I'll start to think about playing live and stuff. But I haven't got any plans at the moment.
Do you feel, Paul, that your fans have grown up with you musically? Listening to this album, I wonder how you relate to the people that you know by your albums, but how aware you are of the sort of market that you're actually aiming at these days.
Well, like one of the funny things, I think, about fame, whatever you want to call it, or notoriety, is in fact, you never actually hear from your really best fans, the people who are totally into it. I always think that anyway, because they just kind of stay at home and listen to your records, and they never come to meet you, they never see you, they never get a chance to see you or anything. It's only occasionally you just stumble across them. I went on a skiing holiday once a few years ago, and I was clambering up this ski lift. I'm not very good, I was clambering up to the top of this snowy mountain, and this American guy who's pretty good, big tall fella, big red ski jacket, he comes up, skis past me, says, "I really love Ram, Paul." And that's how it tends to come, you just sort of meet someone on a ski slope saying, "I really loved your album," but you don't get to discover what they thought was good or how they liked it or whatever. You never really know who your fans are, what they are. I mean, you'll talk to some people occasionally, and if they're representative, then I suppose I do know who my fans are. I feel as though I know them. I always have, because I feel actually that they're just like me. I don't know if they are. I mean, I know a lot of people say, "Oh, come off it, they live on a council estate and you don't." But for me, it's the same as the man who says to me, "You're not working class anymore." I say, "Well, I am, and I don't care if I've got a lot of money or little money. My upbringing was working class, and although I'm kind of mixing with all different people, I don't have to become them. I don't have to." And mainly it's the mind, that's working class, really. That's for me. So it's that kind of thing. I just feel like I've always felt. I always assumed that the fans thought like I do. When I tend to talk to them, they kind of say, "Oh yeah, that's what I thought. Wow, that's just what I thought."
And the converse of that, Paul, is you get to the sort of fan who used to read all the Beatles lyrics, and there were sort of university standard ethical discussions on everything that you ever wrote and recorded. Probably easier to have the guy on the ski slope saying, "Ram's great.
Loved your album." It is, yeah. I never agree with those big long treaties on stuff anyway. I never agree with them. There's always a couple of little points that are interesting. It's flattering to think that you're the subject of stuff like that much concern, but I generally don't really believe it, because I know how I wrote them, and I know what was in my mind when I wrote them. And so someone could come out with this great thing of what I mean, but unless it coincides exactly with what I say, I know it's wrong. But generally, I take it all with a bit of a pinch of salt. I think you have to.
And now we come to Ebony and Ivory, which is Mr. McCartney, Mr. Wonder, and Mr. McCartney, and Mr. Wonder.
That's right, yeah.
Do you see this as a social statement?
Social, yeah, I suppose so, yes. The original thing was that I heard, I think it was Spike Milligan, on a TV show, doing a chat show, and he did this analogy of a piano with black and white notes, and it's no good having all the black notes, it makes just one kind of noise. No good having just white notes, makes another kind of noise. When you combine the two, then it's great, because you can get harmonies, you get all the possibilities then. Spike, being a lover, was saying, therefore it should apply to people. I thought that's a good idea, and it just stayed in my mind. And then I eventually thought of the idea of using the two materials, ebony and ivory, that the piano notes are made out of. I thought, well, that's a good title. Sounds like a good title. So I started to write the song with the chorus, Ebony and Ivory. And then it just flowed, lived together in perfect harmony and that. And then it went into a verse, and it sort of just wrapped itself up, and there it was, kind of thing. And at the time, I thought, well, it's a sort of social comment. But in truth, at the time, I really thought, we probably don't need these kind of social comments anymore. It's a bit old-fashioned to be talking about black and white people living together. We don't really need it. But the more the time has gone on since I wrote it, which is now probably about a year and a half ago, actually more, about 2 years ago, the more that time's gone on, you see that there still is a lot of tension. There still is every bit as much as there was, actually. And although people are doing a lot to break it down, like Martin Luther King and various people from time to time, I now think, yeah, it's every bit as valid. It still needs to be said. There's some people who still need to think of the idea of living together instead of just this kind of, well, I can't live with them, they can't live with me approach. And I think it works from both sides too. I still think that the old thing is it's just a bit of skin, it's just culture and skin and what you're used to and stuff. And you get a black guy brought up in England and he's more British than the British. It shouldn't make any difference. I still do believe when people do try it, that they find that there's something magic. The third possibility is more magic than either of the other two.
What was Stevie's reaction to the song? How much did he contribute towards it once you got him in to work on it?
Well, he contributed a lot, but I actually had written most of the song anyway. But Stevie did a lot of work on it and played the solo and had a lot of suggestions for backups and stuff like that. But I'd actually written the tune and things, so there wasn't a lot of room for him to do stuff, except in the arrangement and that. But he loved the idea of it, actually, and still does. He was saying, look, well, let's face it, the idea is that if Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder can get together as two kind of famous people and can both say, look, we both agree with this idea, and it's not only us, there's millions of people agreed with us, and they tend to be rather kind of good people, like Martin Luther and Bob Marley and people like that. They tend to be really great people. I mean, both of us look upon it as a positive statement for racial harmony, if you want to put it that bluntly. But also, it's just a song.
Let me talk to you very briefly about publishing, in which you've had a great interest, and you've acquired numerous classic songs over the last few years. Is this still something that you're keen to do?
Yeah, well, I love it. This kind of short explanation of it for me is that in anything where you're successful, you will get hold of some money, and then either the taxman will just take it all, or you have to do something with it, which I never knew, and when I didn't have any money, I just thought, well, you just get your money and you keep it in the bank, and you're quite happy. But you do that, and they just start hitting you for it. They say, oh, no, all that money you've got in the bank, it's mine. We're the taxman, and you go, sorry, I thought I earned it. So, yes, but it's ours, really. Oh, sorry. So you learn all these tricks where you've got to actually do something with it, and a lot of people do things like they'll back racing cars, or they'll buy race horses, or they'll do various things like that. And I hoped I'd be able to do something that was like what I do normally, which is music. So music publishing became like a great answer to that. I always fancied myself anyway, aged 70 with a gold watch chain across my huge corporation. I don't know, just something I always fancied, actually. Mainly trying to help what's there already, just make that, just get new versions of it and do stuff with what's there already, really.
I was going to mention the Cimarrons album, which I've listened to a lot, which I thought was a really nice project.
That was good fun for us, and the Sims enjoyed doing it. That's the kind of thing you can do, you can take your songs and you can just say to someone, look, if you don't mind, how's about you doing this? And for me, it means I'm still very involved in music instead of having to have some other involvement and stuff. I just love it. I love music. I love the songs. I mean, I was brought up on a lot of those songs, like Tenderly and After You've Gone, and sort of some of the real old standards in the catalogue. So it's like being involved with great works, it's a bit of a thrill, really.
Thank you very much indeed for your time, and thanks for talking to us.
All right, Andrew McPeebles, you're welcome.
Paul McCartney was talking to Andy Peebles. The programme was produced by Paul Williams.